It's really amazing to me that this notion, what economists call the lump of labor fallacy, and the lump of labor fallacy is that there's this lump of labor, there is this fixed number of jobs, and you take one away, and it's gone. Oh my God. And the reality is there's not a lump of labor fallacy. The reality is we will always, if, as long as we've got the right macroeconomic policy and strong productivity growth, we're going to always create jobs. It's one of the sort of deepest fallacies we have right now in economic policy in our country, that the way you get jobs is you slow down productivity. The way I think of that, if you really fundamentally believe that, why don't we pass a law tomorrow that says, self-service elevators where you press the button, they're dangerous. We need to have elevator operators in every elevator in America. Think about how many jobs that would create. You could create probably 100 or 200,000 jobs overnight. Okay. Now, what would be the result of that? The result of that would be you might create a few jobs, but you'd end up raising rents for everybody in all the buildings. Now everybody would be paying higher rents. They'd have less money. They would then spend that somewhere else. So you would lose 100,000 jobs somewhere else, and we'd all be poor. If you look at all the economic evidence, so the economists who really study this relationship between productivity and jobs, what you find out is that high productivity actually ends up with more jobs in the medium term. You get higher rates of jobs. So think about the 90s. We had low unemployment in the 90s. It was very, very, I mean, people were like astounded at how low it was. Can you even go that low and not have inflation? Or Alan Greenspan was amazed. Well, why did we have that? Because we had super high productivity. As Paul Krugman once said, productivity isn't just one thing; it's everything. I mean, that's really what we want in an economy. Now we've lost sight of that because we've had joblessness. But do you really want to be living in 1940? So we had full employment in 1940 because of the war. But we were making about a third of what we're making today. We really want to go back to a world where we don't have cell phones, where we don't have a lot of people have a second car, where we don't have a lot of people living in single-family houses. I mean, why do we get those things as Americans? It's because we have some of the highest productivity in the world. It's counterintuitive. Even though there are jobs being displaced, if you don't have that process going on, you can't have a growing economy. I actually think that's a big part of the problem we have today. We have too little productivity today, not too much. If we had more productivity, we'd have people feeling more confident. We'd have people with more money. They'd be spending the money. That would create more jobs. They'd be spending more money, create more jobs. That's really what you want. You don't want an economy where nothing ever changes and it's like, oh, we'll hold on to this last job we have. The way to think about that, this notion of some kind of investment leading to jobs directly. So if I'm expanding a cellular network, I'm going to put some towers up, and my workers who put the towers up and put the switches in, they're creating jobs. But then I had to buy some towers, and I had to buy the equipment, the wireless transponders, things like that. Well, that company who I bought it from, they're creating jobs. And then they had to buy the metal and the electronics, and then they're creating jobs. And then all of those workers in that entire system, they're going out and spending a little bit more money at dinner one night, or they're going to a bookstore, or they're going to buy a new couch, and they're creating jobs. So this notion of direct, indirect, and induced jobs, that's how what's economists call the multiplier. So it's not just one job for the 10,000 jobs for the original company putting out a wireless network, it's all of those jobs. So when you're investing in infrastructure, whether it's IT infrastructure or physical infrastructure in a downturn, that does two things. It creates jobs right away through this effect, but it also gets you out of this fearful place where people don't have animal spirits, because A, you're creating more jobs, and they want to create jobs, and they want to create jobs, but also you're creating innovation. And it's this innovation that's also critical to that, because that's raising productivity, which gets you more jobs later. It's also just creating sort of, wow, now I can do all of these things I couldn't do before. So now there's going to be all this, for example, in wireless, all these wireless opportunities. That means more app developers. That means more devices that people are going to want to buy. And then you just sort of on this positive cycle of just expansion and optimism. And that's why this stuff's so important. Leaving aside the pros and cons of any particular merger, I think it's important to think about there's two effects when you have a merger. And one effect is the sort of traditional one of companies now. They have one, two sales departments. You don't need one, two. You have one, and so you can shed workers there. And a lot of the opponents of mergers, particularly opponents on the left, look at that as, oh my God, this is awful. Well, that really goes back to the elevator operator thing. Then, why don't we have a law that says every sales department in the country should hire 5 more people, even though you don't need them? Because that would create jobs. We'll have inefficient sales departments, we'll have higher prices. Reality is mergers, if they're done right, because of efficiencies and getting rid of duplicative functions, means that you are going to have maybe fewer workers, but you have lower prices. Because now I don't have to have 10,000 salespeople, I can have 7,000. I don't need to be paying all those people that, so I can do 2 things with those savings. I can plow them back into new investment. I can build a bigger network because I've got more CapEx, or I can put it into lower prices. Now, either way, those are going to create jobs. Consumers now, hey, I'm not paying as much for my wireless as I was. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go to eat at a restaurant meal, or I'm going to go buy a couch, whatever that might be. If they put it into CapEx, again, then you get back into that wonderful cycle again. I'm buying machines, they're buying some equipment, and you grow. But some mergers also can have big expansion effects as well, just direct expansion effects, and that's the case if it's a merger where there's synergies, and because of these synergies, there's going to be increased capital investment. So that's kind of a Keynesian effect, if you will. Just companies merge, but they see that because of the merger, there's more market opportunities, there's more synergies, so they're just going to put a lot of money. In the case of some mergers in telecom, for example, they'll put money directly into a network, and that can create jobs. So that's why, for example, when you heard about the AT&T merger, and there was some studies that showed that there would be job creation, it's not a crazy notion that there would be job creation. I haven't and analyze the particular studies to know whether the particular numbers are right, but it's not a crazy notion that there can be job creation if a merger spurs more investment. There have been an awful lot of studies that show that organizations that invest more in ICT have higher profitability and they have higher productivity. Now again, there's some organizations that probably invest a lot, but they don't do it right, and there's some organizations maybe don't invest as much. But as a general rule, when you look at the mass of major corporations in the U.S., the ones that invest more in IT have higher productivity and higher profitability, and by extension, they have better prices, and they have better share performance. Now, that's true at societal level, at a societal level as well. So if you look at why has U.S. productivity been better than European productivity, and that's one of the reasons the Europeans are having real problems right now in their economy. There's pretty clear evidence it's because we invest more in IT in this country than the Europeans do. Europeans don't, their companies, their individuals, they don't invest as much in IT as Americans do. And that has made us a richer country. You think about sort of how do you get, if the notion is we want more innovation, more productivity, which creates just this animal spirits of a fast-growing economy and more jobs and higher wages, lower prices. How do we get there? Well, one important point, one important sort of ingredient of that is intellectual property protection. So the very famous economist, Joseph Schumpeter, who's sort of the patron saint of innovation, he's really the economist who first got what innovation was all about. And what Schumpeter, one of his major insights that a lot of people miss is there isn't a lot of innovation in the dry cleaning industry. They don't make any profits because they're all, there's 400 of them in Washington, D.C., and they're all competing, and they make just... Innovation allows you to make a profit. And you think about where does innovation come from? It comes from taking big risks. It comes from putting a lot of money into a risky thing. And if you think, I'm going to do that, but I'm not going to make really profits, why would you do it? You take those risks because you can make supernormal profits. But you don't make them forever, because the thing about innovation is somebody else is going to come in and they're going to out-innovate you, and you might have some good profits for 3 or 4 years, but then somebody else comes in with a better innovation and you might even be out of business. But the core point of that is if you don't have intellectual property protection in that system, if you can come out with an innovation and you don't have 3 or 4 years of profits, you got 2 days of profits because it's just copied. Well, you're not going to innovate. Now, the whole free culture movement, the whole, information wants to be free kind of thing, That's a really good system if you never want anything else produced. So if you think you're happy with all the songs, all the movies, you think for the rest of your life you can just go back and watch old movies, listen to all the music that you have, and you don't really want any more innovations. You don't want a better cell phone, you don't want better broadband, you don't want better drugs. If you think we're happy with our, then the best thing to do would be to eliminate intellectual property because then all that stuff's free. Oh wow, I got free stuff. Well, obviously the absurdity of it is the notion that we could imagine a world without continuous progress. It would be an awful world, an awful world. That would be the worst thing we could leave to our children. Our children grow up and they say, Dad, why is the world exactly the same as when I was 6? Oh, well, son or daughter, it's because we had this intellectual property law that said everything's free. Because that's what would happen. So again, going back to Schumpeter, Schumpeter was right. There's this fine line. You don't want like monopoly so strong. You don't want intellectual property so strong that there's never any kind of information sharing. But you don't want it to be, as the free culture people do, nothing. So we actually, I think, have the balance pretty well set right now in this country. The patent term is 20 years. We've got pretty good copyright. I think we've got it pretty close to right. And this notion somehow that we should just scrap that, I think, a kind of a nonsensical and really fundamentally an ideological notion.